Today I want to look at a spinning project because I have made zero progress on either my hand spun, hand woven, hand dyed tote or my origami jacket project. So let's look at a spinning issue, which I'm in the middle of and which I'm loving very much. So this is from Treenway Silks. It is a colorway called Rainbow Trout. You can see that it's 100% Bombyx silk, which means it's the kind of silkworms that were fed on mulberry leaves as opposed to anything else. So the base color of this silk before dyeing is a pure, pure white. And I picked this up, oh, it must have been last fall at Shaq's uh, Fall Fiber Fest. And because I fell in love with these colors. And then I started spinning it and I ran into, I'm not going to say difficulties, but some puzzles to solve. So the puzzle I needed to solve was how to get a consistent diameter in my hand spun yarn. Because when I first just grabbed the hank and started spinning from the end, the way I often do with top, I did fine for a while. And then every now and then things would go catawampus. Silk has really, really long fibers. And if a really, really long fiber enters the drafting zone or leaves the drafting zone before you're ready for it, it can cause a clump in your yarn. So I decided to try spinning from the fold, which is one of my very favorite ways to spin all kinds of fibers, but especially the slippery ones. So when my wheel's going to be a little bit loud, hopefully it won't be so loud that you can't hear what's going on. So to spin from the fold, and you can see over here, I've got 3 little gobbets of silk all ready to go. To spin from the fold, you basically separate the fiber into small amounts, and on a wool or fleece based product that's not silk, it'll just naturally break apart where the staple length ends. On silk, it can be a little trickier, but silk is always going to have these weak spots. And you'll notice when you look at my little gobbets that, except for this last one, they're remarkably consistent in their length. And then you just put the fiber over your index finger on your fiber hand. Now I'm going to turn on the wheel and it's going to get a little loud because I've got this at a eel wheel at a high speed, because silk requires a lot more twist than you think it's going to. And then you're kind of folding. The fiber is coming off your index finger in a sort of natural fold. Okay, so now that I've spun this gobbet, which is really fun to do on an e-spinner as opposed to a treadle wheel, because on a treadle wheel, you're going to have to put on the smallest whirl you possibly have and have your take up set to almost nothing. But on an e-spinner, you just turn up the rotation of the motor and set your attention to almost nothing. And then you still get, oh, this example isn't a good one. Let's pull back a little bit. But you can see that there's a goodly amount of twist. And if I decide after spinning all of this fiber the first time that this isn't enough twist, I'm just going to run it back through onto a different bobbin, adding even more twist. Okay, so I just picked up my next gobbet of silk, and we will see. In fact, now that I've shown off this beautiful colorway in all of its its entire glory, I'm probably going to just rip the whole thing off. One of the few downsides to spinning from the fold is you do have to spend time stopping and ripping off or picking up your next batch of fiber. Okay, but here's the downside, such as it is. It's not even a downside, it's just a difference, because every spinning method has trade-offs. So if I wanted to keep these colors distinct, it's not going to work very well on many of these bits that I've torn off. Here you can see that the colorway changes from this sort of light rust to this sea green right in the middle. So when I put it over my finger like this, I'm going to be pulling from both colors at once. And again, it's not that this is wrong or bad. It's just, it might not be exactly what you want. It just kind of depends. And in fact, if we zoom in to the fiber, that the yarn that's already on the bobbin, like so, and let me try and get you even closer without jiggling the camera too much. You can see that these colors, so here's a good patch where the rust and the blue went around each other. You can see that this is going to happen a fair amount. And like I said, it might be what you want, it might not be what you want. But that said, what I'm getting by doing this over the fold thing is a more consistent yarn, believe it or not, because this isn't my most consistent spinning, because spinning in front of an audience always does this to me. But if I took my time and did every draft really super carefully, I would end up with a perfectly consistent singles, even if there was a really long gobbet in there, because I'm picking up all the fiber in the drafting triangle from its center as opposed to one end. So if you're working with silk and you want a super consistent yarn, say for a lace shawl, and I have done that. I've done an exquisitely beautiful lace shawl, knitted lace shawl from Treenway Silks Handspun before. Uh, this was how I did it. I ripped everything apart before I started spinning, and it gave me more consistency over the yarn going onto the bobbin. And to start a new gobbet is very simple. Oh, you can see that I just had a little snarl in there. I'm probably going to be able to pick that off with my fingers when I'm knitting from this finished yarn or whatever it is I'm going to do with it. Haven't decided yet. Sometimes you want the fiber because you want the fiber. And you don't start off with a plan of here's what I'm going to do with this, here's the way it goes. Okay, getting there, getting there. So I know the next question beginning spinners might ask is how do you make a good join? And it's honestly just like making a join anywhere else. When you do this technique, by the way, with top, you are introducing a slight, this is essentially a woolen draft. I am adding, I'm discombobulating the perfect alignment of the fibers and adding a little more air in. And it is in fact one of my favorite things to do with wool top, because it's this very, to me, it's more fun than a pure woolen draft because I get more consistency and a lighter yarn, even though, as my coworker Stephanie likes to say, you know, you paid all that money to get the top, all the fibers in the top perfectly aligned, and now you're messing them up. But I'm okay with that. Okay, so I've got the end here in my finger, and you notice I pinched it and I used my little yarn catcher, which holds the spun yarn right up against the bobbin, so that if this end untwists, that's fine, but it's not affecting anything further up. I'm just going to lay this end, move the spinning wheel, make sure this is in frame, just lay the end of the yarn on top of my fiber supply, and here we are going to get a noticeable break in the colors. There's a big difference, but it is what it is, and that's the fun of hand spun yarn, is you get these unique one-of-a-kind features that you just aren't going to ever get in commercial yarn. Okay, so I've just laid it over the top and it's going to start to catch, and that's my join. You just keep pulling and smoothing, pulling and smoothing, pulling and smoothing. So technically this is the inchworm method. This is a short forward draw, but because it's over the fold, the fibers have gotten a little less perfectly aligned, and there's a little more air that's been introduced to them, at least in a wool blend. I'm not sure how this all works in silk, because silk just follows its own rules. But the resulting yarn is going to be just simply gorgeous, and I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, but whatever it is, it's doggone it, it's going to be pretty. So that's spinning silk from the fold, and some of the differences that it's going to introduce into your spun yarn as you go. And I hope this is helpful.